When I retired at 64, I thought I had finally earned the right to breathe. 35 years on the factory floor, welding steel, lifting boxes, sweating through long nights. I had sacrificed my body so my family never went hungry. My hands still carried the scars, and my back still ached from years of labor. I thought retirement meant peace. I thought it meant I could spend time with my daughter, maybe even feel useful in her life in a new way. But instead, the words that came out of her mouth cut deeper than any steel shard ever had. "Dad," Emily said, her voice trembling between frustration and pity, "I can't keep feeding another mouth. You need to pull your weight. I got you a job where I work. You start Monday, another mouth to feed." I sat there at the kitchen table, staring at her like I didn't recognize the little girl I once carried on my shoulders to county fairs, the one I stayed up late with when she was sick, the one who clung to me after her mother passed away. My Emily, my pride, my reason for pushing through decades of back-breaking labor. And now, to her, I wasn't a father anymore. I was a mouth, a burden. Still, I smiled. Not because I didn't hurt, God, I did, but because I didn't want her to see me as weak. I folded my hands, nodded, and said, "All right, sweetheart. If that's what you want, I'll do it." The truth is, I didn't want to go. Retirement was supposed to be freedom, but suddenly it felt like exile. I wasn't sure if she really needed me to take that job, or if she was ashamed of me sitting at home, useless. Either way, I agreed. Because that's what fathers do. We protect our children from pain, even if it means swallowing our own. Emily was 32, single, working her way up at a logistics company downtown. She had always been ambitious, the kind of girl who worked through lunch breaks and brought files home on weekends. Her boss, Richard Caldwell, was the name I'd heard most often at the dinner table. She described him as sharp, demanding, and old school. But behind her careful words, I sensed the truth. He was the kind of man who saw employees as tools, not people. I told myself maybe I could blend in at her office. Maybe I could sweep floors, file papers, do something simple. After all, I had always been a worker. Work was in my blood. What I didn't realize was that walking into that building would set off a chain of events that would change both our lives forever. On Sunday night, I polished the same black shoes I had worn for job interviews decades earlier. The leather was cracked, the shine dull, but I did my best. Emily saw me brushing them at the table and sighed. "You don't have to go overboard, Dad. It's just an office. Nobody cares about polished shoes." "Doesn't matter," I said quietly. "First impressions count." She looked at me then, her eyes softening for just a moment, and I thought I saw the little girl I used to know peek through. But just as quickly her face hardened again, and she went back to scrolling through her emails on her phone. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling fan, unable to sleep. My wife had always said Emily had a fire in her, a drive to be independent. I used to admire that fire, but now I wondered if it burned too hot enough to scorch the people who loved her most. When the morning came, I straightened my old jacket and followed Emily out the door. She walked fast, shoulders stiff, like she was embarrassed to be seen with me. I lagged a few steps behind, my heart pounding with every block we walked closer to her company. I could already feel it. The whispers, the judgment, the sting of being the old man who didn't belong. But I didn't know then just how cruel reality would be. I didn't know that when her boss laid eyes on me, he wouldn't just see a tired old man trying to make himself useful. He'd see something else, something that would cost my daughter everything. And it all started with those words I couldn't shake. Another mouth to feed. When I tell people I worked 35 years at the steel plant, they usually raise their eyebrows like I just admitted to serving time. And in a way, maybe I did. The factory wasn't just a job, it was a sentence. 6 days a week, 12-hour shifts, hot summers that cooked the air inside, and winters so cold your hands felt welded to the metal. I missed birthdays, baseball games, even my wife's anniversary dinners. But every time I punched that clock, I told myself it was worth it. My family would never go without. When my wife, Linda, passed away from cancer, Emily was only 15. I still remember the night she cried herself to sleep in my arms, whispering, "Don't leave me too, Dad." That promise, to never leave her, became my purpose. I worked harder, buried my grief in sweat and steel, because I had to keep us afloat. Emily grew into a strong young woman, stubborn like her mother, determined to prove she didn't need anyone's help. So when I finally retired, I thought maybe life would slow down. I imagined mornings spent in the garden, afternoons reading the newspaper, evenings watching TV with Emily when she wasn't working late. But instead, I felt something I hadn't expected. Emptiness. The routine that had once defined me was gone, and all I had left were the quiet walls of our little house. At first, Emily seemed fine with me being home. She'd smile when she saw dinner waiting for her, nod politely when I asked about her day. But as weeks turned into months, her tone changed. She started making little comments. "Dad, you've been napping a lot lately." Or, "Maybe you should get out of the house more." They were small jabs, but they carried weight. And then came the blow I'll never forget. "I can't keep feeding another mouth." That sentence echoed through me like the clang of a dropped wrench on steel. My own daughter, the one I sacrificed everything for, saw me as a burden. And yet, I didn't argue. I didn't tell her about the sleepless nights when I wondered if my heart would give out before she finished high school, or the back pain that shot through me like lightning every morning. I didn't remind her of the times I skipped meals so she could eat better. I just smiled and told her I'd take the job she found me. Emily worked as an office assistant at Caldwell Logistics, a mid-sized shipping company that handled everything from local deliveries to cross-country hauls. She'd started there in her early 20s, climbing slowly, determined to prove herself. I knew she was proud of the independence she'd carved out, even if the paychecks barely stretched far enough. Still, I couldn't help but notice the strain in her voice when she talked about her boss, Richard Caldwell. The man's name came up often, in clipped tones, through sighs, and with forced politeness. "Mr. Caldwell likes things done a certain way," she'd say, or, "Mr. Caldwell doesn't tolerate mistakes." To me, it sounded like she was trying to convince herself as much as me. The more she spoke about him, the more I realized something. Emily lived in constant fear of disappointing this man, and now she was dragging me into that world. On the night before I was supposed to start, I tried to reassure her. We sat at the kitchen table, her laptop open in front of her, spreadsheets glowing on the screen. I cleared my throat. "Em," I said softly, "you don't have to worry. I'll do whatever they need me to. I'll keep my head down, stay out of the way. You won't even notice I'm there." She rubbed her temples, exhausted. "It's not about me noticing, Dad. It's about Mr. Caldwell. He doesn't like distractions. Just don't say too much, okay? Do what you're told," I swallowed hard. It wasn't the first time I'd been told to do what I was told, but hearing it from my own daughter stung. I wanted to remind her that I'd been working longer than Caldwell had probably been alive, but instead, I nodded. "All right, sweetheart. I'll do my best." As she closed her laptop and headed to bed, I sat there alone, staring at the faint reflection of my face in the window. The man, looking back at me, wasn't the same one who had lifted beams with his bare hands or shouted orders over the roar of machines. He looked tired, small, like someone who had been demoted from father to dependent. Still, I told myself, maybe this job would change things. Maybe, if I proved I could still contribute, Emily would see me differently. Maybe she'd remember that I wasn't just another mouth to feed. I was her father. What I didn't know then was that stepping into her workplace would set off a chain of events that neither of us could have imagined. Events that would test our bond, shake her career, and force me to confront the harshest truth of all. Sometimes the people you sacrifice everything for are the ones who hurt you the most. The morning of my first day at Caldwell Logistics felt like the first day of school, only worse. At least, back in school, I had hoped that one day I'd grow into myself. Now, I was 64, with gray hair, aching joints, and no illusions about fresh starts. Emily walked beside me as we entered the glass doors of the office building. She kept her eyes forward, her shoulders stiff, like she didn't want anyone to notice us walking in together. I trailed a step behind, my old jacket feeling too heavy, my polished shoes creaking with every step. The lobby was sleek, buzzing with young people in crisp shirts, sharp skirts, and sneakers that probably cost more than my week's groceries. Their conversations were quick, full of acronyms and jargon I couldn't keep up with. I felt like a relic, a museum piece that had accidentally wandered into the present. Emily led me to the front desk. "This is my father, Tom Hargrove," she said, her voice low, as if she hoped nobody else would hear. "He'll be starting today." The receptionist, a young man with perfectly styled hair and a smirk that never left his face, looked me over. His eyes flicked from my wrinkled hands to my jacket. "Welcome aboard," he said, though his tone made it sound more like, "Good luck fitting in." Emily avoided my eyes as she hurried me down a hallway. I caught glimpses of open-plan offices filled with people tapping away at keyboards, sipping expensive coffee, laughing quietly with each other. When I walked past, their laughter stopped. Heads turned. Whispers started. "Who's that? Is he a client? No, that's Emily's dad." "He's working here now." I clenched my jaw and kept walking. I'd been through worse. Men in the factory used to test the new guys by throwing wrenches at their boots or mocking them until they broke. But that was different. That was about proving toughness. This felt like pity. Emily stopped at a small corner desk with a battered computer and a stack of dusty files. "You'll start here," she said briskly. "Just organize these records, input the data into the system, and don't worry if it's slow at first." She hesitated, then added, "And, Dad, just don't talk too much, okay? People here, they don't really get it." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "I'll be fine, Em." For the next few hours, I kept my head down. I typed carefully, pecking at the keyboard like it might bite me. The numbers blurred, the software was unfamiliar, but I pushed through. Every now and then, someone would walk by and glance at me, their lips twitching in suppressed laughter. "Hey, Emily's dad, need help finding the power button?" one of the younger guys joked as he passed. His friends chuckled. I forced a smile. I'll figure it out. But inside, I burned. Not for myself, I could take ridicule, but for Emily. I knew every whispered joke, every sideways glance reflected back on her. By lunchtime, I was exhausted. My back ached from the stiff chair, my eyes from staring at the screen. Emily walked by with her tray, her face tight. She didn't stop at my desk. She didn't even look at me. That's when I first saw him, Richard Caldwell. He strode through the office like he owned not just the company but the air everyone breathed. Mid-40s, sharp suit, clean-shaven jaw, eyes that scanned people like they were numbers on a ledger. He didn't smile. He didn't need to. His presence alone was enough to silence a room. When his gaze landed on me, I felt it like a weight pressing on my chest. He stopped, narrowed his eyes, then turned to Emily, who had just returned from the break room. "Emily," he said in a voice that carried across the office, "Who is this?" She froze. "This is my father, Mr. Caldwell. He's helping out here now." Caldwell's lips curled into something between a smirk and a sneer. "Your father." He looked me over from head to toe, his expression hardening with every second. Didn't realize we were running a charity. The words stung, but I kept my voice steady. "Sir, I'm just here to work." "I don't need charity." A few employees stopped typing, their eyes flicking nervously between us. Emily's face turned crimson. She opened her mouth to speak, but Caldwell cut her off. "We'll see how long this arrangement lasts," he said sharply, before walking away without another glance. I sat back down, my hands trembling on the keyboard. My chest burned, not from anger, but from fear. Fear that my presence would cost Emily more than she realized. The whispers didn't stop after that. If anything, they grew louder. People eyed me like I was an intruder, a mistake that shouldn't be there. And all the while, Emily kept her head down, her jaw clenched so tight I thought her teeth might crack. I wanted to tell her it would be okay. I wanted to say I could handle it. But deep down, I knew the truth. I had just become the crack in the wall of her carefully built career. And soon, that wall would come crashing down. After my first day, I considered quitting. I came home, kicked off my shoes, and sat on the edge of my bed with my head in my hands. Every whisper, every smirk, every sideways glance replayed in my mind like a cruel movie I couldn't shut off. For the first time in decades, I felt truly out of place. I belonged in the noise of the factory, not in this polished office with glowing screens and silent judgments. But when I thought of Emily, the way her face flushed red when Caldwell mocked me, something inside me hardened. I had spent my entire life teaching her to push through pain, to never fold when things got tough. If I walked away now, what kind of example would that be? So the next morning, I woke up early, shaved carefully, and straightened my old jacket, again. This time, I wasn't going to just survive, I was going to prove that I could still be useful. I started by arriving before anyone else. The janitor looked surprised to see me standing outside when he unlocked the doors. By the time the first employees trickled in with their lattes and headphones, I had already sorted 3 stacks of neglected files and fixed a jammed copier that had been sitting broken for weeks. It felt good, simple, honest work. My hands remembered what it was like to fix things, to solve problems without needing an instruction manual. Over the next week, I made it my mission to earn my place. I ran errands nobody else wanted, carried boxes from storage, organized supply closets. When a young intern struggled to assemble a display stand for a client presentation, I stepped in and put it together in minutes. He looked at me in surprise and said, "Thanks, Mr. Hargrove." "You saved me?" Word started to spread. A few employees began nodding to me in the hallways. Some even asked for help when their computers froze or their office chairs wobbled. They saw I wasn't just dead weight, I was someone who still had something to give. But Emily wasn't impressed. One evening, as we walked home, she snapped, "Dad, you don't have to kill yourself over this. Just do the minimum and keep your head down." I stopped in my tracks. "Emily, I can't do that. I won't be the reason people look down on you. If I'm here, I have to prove myself." She sighed, her voice rising. "That's not the point. You just being here is already making waves. Caldwell is watching. He thinks I brought you in as some kind of charity case. The harder you work, the more attention you draw, and that's bad for me." Her words stung, but I kept my voice calm. "I'm not trying to embarrass you, sweetheart. I just want to make you proud." She shook her head, muttering, "You don't get it," before storming ahead. That night, I lay awake replaying her words. Maybe she was right. Maybe nothing I did would be enough to erase the stain of being the old man in the office. But if that was true, then the least I could do was protect her from the fallout. The very next day, the storm came. I was in the hallway when I heard raised voices spilling from Caldwell's office. I paused, my heart thudding as I recognized Emily's voice. "Sir, he's not a distraction," she was saying, firm but nervous. "My father works harder than anyone here. He's organized the records, fixed equipment, even helped a staff." Caldwell's voice cut through like a blade. "This isn't a handyman service, Emily. It's a logistics company. Do you think clients want to see someone's father wandering around like he belongs here? You're supposed to take this job seriously. Instead, you parade him in here like it's family day." I felt my blood boil. My hands trembled at my sides. Every instinct told me to stay out of it, but another part of me, the father in me, couldn't let her stand alone against that man. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. Emily's eyes widened, her face pale. Caldwell looked up from behind his desk, his expression twisted with disdain. "Sir," I said evenly, "if there's a problem, take it up with me." Emily's not to blame. She didn't bring me here for charity. I wanted to prove I could still work, that I wasn't just a burden. Emily shook her head desperately, mouthing, "Dad, no." But I stood firm. If anyone should be punished, punish me. Fire me if you want. Just leave my daughter out of it. For a moment, silence filled the room. Caldwell leaned back in his chair, his eyes cold and calculating. Then, slowly, a smirk spread across his face. "You're right, Hargrove," he said. "She should have known better. Consider this her last mistake." My heart dropped. Emily gasped. And in that single moment I realized my decision, my attempt to protect her, had just lit the fuse that would blow everything apart. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Consider this her last mistake. I stood frozen in Caldwell's office, my fists clenched at my sides. My whole life I'd taken hits, insults, layoffs, injuries, but nothing had ever felt like this. It wasn't me he was firing. It was my daughter, my Emily, the girl I raised alone, the one I worked double shifts for, the one I swore I'd protect no matter the cost. "Sir, you can't mean that," I said, my voice low but trembling with rage. "You can't fire her because of me." Caldwell leaned forward, elbows on his desk, his lips curling into a smug smile. "I can, and I just did. She compromised this workplace by dragging in dead weight. That's not the kind of judgment I tolerate." Emily's eyes welled with tears. She tried to speak, but her voice cracked. "Mr. Caldwell, please." "Save it," he snapped, cutting her off with a flick of his hand. "Pack up your desk. You're finished here." My heart felt like it had been ripped out of my chest. I turned to Emily, but the look on her face crushed me even more. She wasn't angry at Caldwell. She was angry at me, hurt, betrayed. "This is exactly what I was afraid of," she whispered. "Emily." I reached out, but she pulled away. The room felt smaller, hotter. I wanted to shout, to slam my fists on Caldwell's desk, to make him see the cruelty in what he was doing. But a voice inside me, the voice of every foreman and boss I'd ever had, told me it was pointless. Caldwell had already decided. The door creaked open. A few employees lingered in the hallway, curious about the commotion. They'd heard enough to piece it together. I saw their faces, shocked, sympathetic, angry, and for the first time, Caldwell seemed to notice them too. "Back to work," he barked, his face reddening. But the employees didn't scatter like he expected. They stayed, watching, listening. One young woman, Sarah, who worked in accounting, stepped forward. "Mr. Caldwell, with all due respect, that's not right. Emily's one of the hardest workers here." Another voice chimed in from behind her. "And Tom's been helping everyone. He fixed equipment, stayed late, did work nobody else wanted to do. You can't punish her for that." Caldwell's eyes darted around, his control slipping. "This isn't up for discussion," he snapped. "I run this office, not a democracy." But the murmurs grew. Phones appeared, subtle at first, employees recording the scene. One man whispered, "We should send this to HR." Another muttered, "Or the union rep." For the first time, I saw a flicker of uncertainty in Caldwell's eyes. I stepped closer to his desk, my voice steady, though my chest burned with fury. "You think firing Emily will prove your power, but all it proves is your weakness. A real leader lifts people up. You tear them down." Gasps filled the doorway. Emily stared at me, stunned. Caldwell's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, a new voice cut through the tension. "What's going on here?" It was her, Mrs. Grant, the regional director. I'd seen her name on the company letterhead but never expected to meet her. She stepped into the office, sharp-eyed, flanked by two assistants. Caldwell straightened, his smugness cracking into nervous politeness. "Mrs. Grant, I was just addressing an issue with an employee. By threatening her and humiliating her father in front of the staff?" she interrupted, her voice like steel. I heard enough walking down the hall. She turned to Emily. "Is this true? Has he been targeting you?" Emily's lips trembled. For a moment, she looked like she might stay silent. But then she lifted her chin. "Yes, and not just me. He's belittled others too. My father tried to protect me, and now he wants to punish me for it." Mrs. Grant's gaze swung back to Caldwell, her expression cold. "Richard, step out. Now. We'll be reviewing this immediately." The color drained from Caldwell's face. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Under the weight of everyone's eyes, the staff, the cameras, his boss, he had no choice but to leave. As he stormed past me, he hissed, "You'll regret this, old man." But I didn't, not for a second. The room was silent for a beat after he left, broken only by the sound of Emily's quiet sob. I turned to her, my voice soft. "I'm sorry, Em. I never wanted to cost you your job. I just couldn't let him treat you that way." For the first time in days, she didn't pull away. She let me take her hand, her tears falling freely. "Dad, I thought you were making things harder." "But you were just standing up for me. No one's ever done that here." The staff in the hallway nodded, some even clapped quietly, as if to affirm what she said. At that moment, I realized something. The humiliation, the whispers, the fear, none of it mattered anymore. What mattered was that my daughter finally saw the truth. I wasn't just another mouth to feed. I was still her father, still the man who'd fight for her, no matter the cost. The office never felt the same after that day. For the first time, the whispers weren't about me. They were about Richard Caldwell. Word spread fast. How he had humiliated an employee in front of her coworkers, how he'd mocked an old man who only wanted to work, how the staff had finally spoken up against him. By the end of the week, Caldwell was gone. Whether he resigned or was pushed out, no one knew for sure, but his nameplate vanished from the door, and his office sat empty. Emily, however, didn't get the victory she deserved. Mrs. Grant called her in, praised her courage, even hinted that she would have her job back. But Emily surprised me. She walked out of that meeting, handed in her badge, and said quietly, "I don't want it anymore." When I asked her why, she explained it on the walk home. "Dad, I realized something. I've been killing myself to impress people like Caldwell, people who would never value me no matter how hard I worked. You were willing to risk everything for me, and I've been risking everything for men like him. I don't want to live like that anymore." Her voice cracked when she said it, but there was relief too, like she had finally let go of a weight that had been crushing her for years. For a while, we lived in limbo. She was out of work, I was technically still retired, and money was tight. But Emily picked herself back up faster than I expected. She polished her resume, applied to new positions, and within a few months landed a better job at a different company. This time, the manager who hired her looked her in the eye and said, "We value people who speak up for what's right." It wasn't just a job, it was validation. And me? I found a strange kind of peace. No, I didn't go back to the factory. And no, I wasn't needed in an office full of glowing screens. But I realized that usefulness isn't about where you work. It's about what you give. I started volunteering at the community center, fixing old computers, teaching kids basic carpentry, even helping some of the younger men write resumes. At first, I worried it was just busy work, but then one of the boys, a shy kid named Marcus, looked at me after I helped him finish a project and said, "Mr. Hargrove, you're the only one who believes I can do this." In that moment, I understood something. Retirement wasn't an ending. It was just a chance to give in a different way. But the most important change wasn't in me. It was in Emily. One evening, months after the confrontation, we sat on the porch watching the sun sink behind the houses. She turned to me, her voice quiet but steady. "Dad, about what I said before, about not needing another mouth to feed." I didn't mean it the way it came out. I was scared. I thought I was carrying everything alone. I forgot that you've been carrying me my whole life. I looked at her, my little girl, not so little anymore, and I felt the sting of tears in my eyes. "You don't owe me an apology, Em. You've worked harder than most people twice your age. I just wanted to remind you that you're not alone. You'll never be alone as long as I'm breathing." She leaned her head against my shoulder, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like a father again. Not a burden, not a mouth to feed, but a man who still mattered. Looking back, I don't regret a thing. If standing up for my daughter cost me my pride, my comfort, even my peace, I'd do it all again in a heartbeat. Because at the end of the day, jobs come and go, bosses rise and fall, but family? Family is what you fight for, no matter the cost. And that's what I want anyone listening to remember. We live in a world that teaches us to measure worth in paychecks, promotions, titles, and appearances. But none of that matters when the lights go out and the office closes for good. What matters are the people who sit with you at the dinner table, the ones who carry you when you stumble, the ones you would sacrifice everything for without thinking twice. So, I'll ask you this, the same way I asked myself that night when everything came crashing down. If you had to choose between your job and your family, which would you pick? That was my story. A story about work, pride, sacrifice, and love, but most of all, about family. Because no matter how much the world tries to measure us in numbers or titles, at the end of the day, it's the people we stand beside that define who we are. If this story moved you, if it made you think about your own family or the sacrifices they've made for you, then I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell me, what would you choose if it came down to your family or your job? And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to the channel for more stories that will touch your heart and make you think. Thank you for listening. And remember, jobs come and go, but family is forever.